Hey guys! In this video, I'd like to give you a really quick and short overview about some of the more interesting implementations that I did for the Airwiggles ImplemenTournament 2024. I'm planning on doing a really deep dive, long and extended, maybe in multiple parts, video of all of the details. So this one is more like a quick sneak peek, if you want to call it like that. So let's begin with the ambience of the game. This one is split into multiple tracks. One is for the ship ambience, which is partly spatialized. It sounds like this. Which is automated by the speed of the spaceship. Then there is the stereo ambience bed for the outer space. No automation in here. And then there's the sound for the particles that are hitting the spaceship when flying. This is a scatterer instrument with a nested spatialized event, which sounds like this. So the spawn rate and the pitch is automated by the speed of the spaceship to control the amount of particles that are hitting the spaceship when flying. The next event I'd like to show you is the asteroid destroy and the laser impact sound, because those two are kind of similarly laid out, because I wanted to create a more deep layer of immersion by using a delay that is automated by the distance that the sound is appearing. Which basically means I wanted to kind of simulate the time it takes for the audio to reach the listener when these sounds are happening. Another little specialty that I introduced for the asteroid destroy sound is that I'm using a really accurately spatialized explosion sound with the Atmoki spatializer plugins. And I'm using an additional layer for the tail that is using the normal FMOD spatializer with an automation on the minimum extent and the 2D pan mix and axis as well as width. The explosion sound is also automated by the size of the asteroid. That's a little calculation that I implemented myself into Unreal that I'll show you later. But basically it means that there are different asteroid explosion sounds triggered depending on how big the asteroid is. Those are sounding like this. The next event I'd like to show you is my asteroid collision scanner that I set up for this little game. So basically what it does is that the game is looking for asteroid in the direct flight path of the ship. And there is a continuous loop for the scanning sound when there is no asteroid found in the path. This is just the same sound as when there is a asteroid found, but I changed the sound of it by automating the pitch and the low pass of the sound. So when there's no asteroid found, it sounds like this. And when there is an asteroid found, then these transitions are being triggered by the trigger conditions. And in addition to the collision detected parameter condition, there's also a collision distance condition, which is set up for all of these loop points in order to make the beeping sound faster the closer the asteroid is to the ship. That's the setup for the scanner. Next, I'd like to show you the event for the thruster loop. This event is spatialized by the Atmoki True Spatializer as well, and is positioned at the exact position of the thrusters in the game. So this is consisting of two nested events. Those are just different layers for the different speeds of the spaceship, which is automated in pitch and the volume for the different layers. And I'm also introducing a flanger effect depending on the speed to make the acceleration and deceleration more obvious in the sound. One specialty is that I am turning down the volume of those thruster sounds when the thruster is not active. And what it does as well is that there is a different afterburner kind of sound that is only active when the thrusters are active. And when there is no thrust active, you can only hear the engines kind of turn or move to not make the thrusters immediately completely without sound. In addition to these effects, I also have an additional boost afterburner layer that is only activated when the boost active parameter is set to yes, to give it an additional powerful sounding layer when there is boost. The last sound group I'd like to show you are the laser sounds. So first there's the laser fire sound, which is divided into two nested events, one for the shot itself and one for the tail. The shot event is being spatialized again by the True Spatial Atmoki Spatializer to give it the best possible spatial accuracy. And the tail is just a normal non-spatialized stereo sound that has an automation on the timeline for the reverb send. To make the laser shooting a bit more interesting and not so static, I introduced a randomized 3 EQ on this. But what I did as well was introducing a shots fired counter, which is counting the laser shots that are fired in full auto mode. So this parameter is just an integer that is counting from 0 to 10. And this is set by the game engine. And what this is doing on the laser shots is that it is introducing a level of distortion on the sound, and that it is increasing the pitch of these multi-instruments as well. So these two multi-instruments are just the basic shot sound, and there's an overload layer. The overload layer is also increased in pitch, but is at 0 decibels volume when the counter is at 0, which basically means that the overload layer is not audible when the weapons are shot in single fire. The counted shots are also used for all of the other laser sounds. So there is a mechanics layer that is introduced when multiple shots are fired in full auto, like, you know, in many other games, when you're firing an assault rifle, for example, and the magazine is being emptied more and more, then there is a rattle introduced. And I wanted to recreate this kind of sound with this layer. Another one is a looping overload sound. That is also introduced after the first shot that is being fired in full auto. This is to fill up the gaps between the shots. The last sound is a reload sound for the weapons. This one is triggered after the weapons have stopped firing. So this has a normal sound when there is only one shot fired, basically in single fire. And there is an overload layer as well that is introduced after the first shot in full auto. And there is distortion and volume automations for the reload and the overload track for the different shot counts that are fired. Now let's have a real quick look at the mixer setup. So the first thing is that I am having some voiceover lines that are being triggered by the game, and I'm using some side chaining for the voices. So the first thing I have done is that I put a compressor with a 1-to-1 ratio on the voice group. This is not for doing any compression. The solo purpose of this is to do some sidechain expansion by the word sounds. I'm using the compressor for this because if you have any other volume knob, for example on the fader or a gain effect, you can only apply a decreasing amount for the volume on those. But on the gain knob of the compressor, you can apply a negative amount of decibels, which is a reduction in volume, but also a positive amount of decibels, which is an increase in volume. So what I'm doing is increasing the volume of the voice group when the word sounds are loud, which means when all of the other sounds are really loud, for example, when I'm boosting and or shooting, then the voice sounds are increased in volume. But at the same time, I'm having a sidechain on this, which is basically triggering some sidechaining on a 3 EQ on the word sounds to lower mainly the mid frequencies of this equalizer to make a little space in all of the other sounds for the voices to come through a little bit better. Another thing that I did in terms of sidechaining was for the asteroid explosion sound. So the thing is, I'm using FMOD 2.3 for this project. And although it has a multiband compressor and has the spectral sidechain feature, I found it to be really buggy and causing some big problems when having one of these effects in the project. So when playing the game with the profiler on and even playing it normally, it would cause some real strange behavior on sometimes. So some sounds wouldn't play at all. And I found the only way to get around this was to leave out these new effects completely. So what I did was using an additional return for the explosion sounds that has a multiband EQ for a low pass of 200 Hertz on it, which basically means that I'm only having the very low frequencies of the asteroid explosions feeding this sidechain. And I've got another sidechain that is just using the normal frequency spectrum of the explosion group. I've done this because I wanted two different types of sidechaining done here. So the first thing was that I am ducking the ambient sounds of the game by the normal explosion sidechain. But on the spaceship group, I am using the explosion low pass sidechain to lower the volume of all of the spaceship sounds by 6 decibels for all really low and big explosion sounds that are louder than minus 11 decibels. And if they are reaching or surpassing minus 5 decibels, this is applying the full amount of 6 decibels reduction. In addition, I'm using more of a traditional sidechain compression for the normal explosion sounds as well, but this is a really gentle 1.5:1 ratio to just give it a little ducking when there is normal explosions happening and a more intense reduction in volume when there is this big and low frequency explosion happening. Something similar is done on the weapons group as well, but there is no normal volume ducking. There's just this sidechain EQing. So I'm reducing the mid frequencies of all of the weapon sounds of the spaceship when there are normal explosions happening, and I'm pulling away the high frequencies with these big low passed explosion sounds that are really loud, above -8 decibels. The last interesting thing that I've done on one or two different groups in the game and on the master bus is that I introduced a multi-stage compression for this. So this basically means that I'm not using just the limiter or a single compressor to control the volume for this, but I'm using two compressors and the limiter with different settings to make the transition for the reduction a little bit more gentle. So the first compressor has a really low ratio of 1.3:1, but it is starting at -10 decibels already to start reducing the overall volume when it is getting louder. The next compressor is a little bit harder. It has a 5:1 ratio, but this is just starting at -2 decibels. So when we are really close to hitting the peaking threshold. And the last instance is just the normal limiter at -0.1 decibels to catch all of the remaining peaks that might occur. Last thing in FMOD are the snapshots. So I have three that are kind of interesting to talk about. The first is the boost begin snapshot. So this is triggered when, as the name suggests, the player starts boosting. And this is just for giving the effect that the boost is so intense that all of the other sounds are sucked away for a little short amount of time. And I'm doing this with an AHDSR on the intensity of the snapshot itself. So this has a real short attack of 100 milliseconds and a short hold of 200 milliseconds and a kind of gentle long delay of 1 second. And what it is doing is that it is completely muting the thruster group, and it is lowering the volume of most other sounds, kind of the weapons group, the ambience, and the asteroid sounds. The other one is the boost snapshot itself. This is active as long as the player is boosting. So this is doing two kind of things. The first one is that it is introducing a tremolo and a distortion effect on the thruster sounds. And another thing that I found really useful was creating a timeline automation for this snapshot, so that it is basically reducing the volume of the thruster sound and the boosting sound over a longer period of time. I did this to prevent ear fatigue when boosting over a longer period of time, because the boosting sound is really loud and I wanted it to be really loud, because when I would lower the volume overall, I found it to be not that impactful. So I came up with the idea to have the boosting sound at full volume for 3 seconds, and after that lowering the volume to -3 dB over a course of another 3 seconds to have it not as loud when boosting over longer periods of time. This is applied to the thruster group and the booster group as well. Same goes for the shooting snapshot. This is just purely for lowering the volume for a longer shooting duration. This has also a timeline automation, and after 3 seconds I'm lowering the volume of the laser shooting sounds by 4 decibels. And because I still have to learn to be brief and not explain every little thing, we are now already over 20 minutes in the video. So I think it would be best to move the blueprint explanations to the detailed video and limit this one purely to FMOD. I hope you still enjoyed and maybe even learned something new. See you next time and cheers!